This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Anti-Federalist Papers. Anti-Federalist number 10. Letters from the Federal Farmer to the Republican. Letter number 8. January 3rd, 1788. Dear Sir, before I proceed to examine the objections, I beg leave to add a valuable idea respecting representation to be collected from Delhomme and other able writers, which essentially tends to confirm my positions. They very justly impute the establishment of general and equal liberty in England to a balance of interests and powers among the different orders of men, aided by a series of fortunate events that never before and possibly never again will happen. Before the Norman Conquest the people of England enjoyed much of this liberty. The first of the Norman kings, aided by foreign mercenaries and foreign attendants, obnoxious to the English, immediately laid arbitrary taxes and established arbitrary courts, and severely oppressed all orders of people. The barons and people, who recollected their former liberties, were induced by those oppressions to unite their efforts in their common defence. Here it became necessary for the great men, instead of deceiving and depressing the people, to enlighten and court them. The royal power was too strongly fixed to be annihilated, and rational means were, therefore, directed to limiting it within proper bounds. In this long and arduous task, in this new species of contest, the barons and people succeeded, because they had been freemen, and knew the value of the object they were contending for, because they were the people of a small island, one people who found it practicable to meet and deliberate in one assembly and act under one system of resolves, and who were not obliged to meet in different provincial assemblies, as is the case in large countries, as was the case in France, Spain, etc., where their determinations were inconsistent with each other, and where the king could play off one assembly against another. It was in this united situation the people of England were for several centuries enabled to combine their exertions, and by compacts, as Magna Carta, a Bill of Rights, and etc., were able to limit by degrees the royal prerogatives and establish their own liberties. The first combination was probably the accidental effect of pre-existing circumstances, but there was an admirable balance of interests in it, which has been the parent of English liberty, and excellent regulations enjoyed since that time. The executive power having been uniformly in the king, and he the visible head of the nation, it was chimerical for the greatest lord or most popular leader, consistent with the state of the government and opinion of the people, to seriously think of becoming the king's rival, or to aim at even a share of the executive power. The greatest subject's prospect was only in acquiring a respectable influence in the House of Commons, House of Lords, or in the ministry, circumstances at once made it the interests of the leaders of the people to stand by them. Far otherwise it was with the ephori in Sparta and tribunes in Rome. The leaders in England have led the people to freedom, in almost all other countries to servitude. The people in England have made use of deliberate exertions, their safest and most efficient weapons. In other countries they have often acted like mobs, and been enslaved by their enemies or by their own leaders. In England the people have been led uniformly and systematically by their representatives to secure their rights by compact, and to abolish innovations upon the government. They successfully obtained Magna Carta, the powers of taxation, the power to propose laws, the Habeas Corpus Act, Bill of Rights, and etc. They in short secured general and equal liberty, security to their persons and property, and, as an everlasting security and bulwark of their liberties, they fixed the democratic branch in the legislature, and jury trial in the execution of the laws, the freedom of press, and etc. In Rome and most other countries the reverse of all this is true. In Greece, Rome, and wherever the civil law has been adopted, torture has been admitted. In Rome the people were subject to arbitrary confiscations, and even their lives would be arbitrarily disposed of by consuls, tribunes, dictators, masters, and etc. Half of the inhabitants were slaves, and the other half never knew what equal liberty was. Yet in England the people have had king, lords, and commons. In Rome they had consuls, senators, and tribunes. Why then was the government of England so mild and favourable to the body of the people, and that of Rome an ambitious and oppressive aristocracy? Why in England have the revolutions always ended in stipulations in favor of general liberty, equal laws, and the common rights of the people, and in most other countries in favor only of a few influential men? The reasons, in my mind, are obvious. In England the people have been substantially represented in many respects. In the other countries it has not been so. Perhaps a small degree of attention to a few simple facts will illustrate this. In England, from the oppressions of the Norman kings to the Revolution in 1688, during which period of 200 or 300 years the English liberties were ascertained and established, the aristocratic part of that nation was substantially represented by a very large number of nobles, possessing similar interests and feelings with those they represented. The body of the people, about 4 or 5 millions, then mostly a frugal, landed people, were represented by about 500 representatives, taken not from the order of men which formed the aristocracy, but from the body of the people, and possessed of the same interests and feelings. De Lolme, speaking of the British representation, expressly founds all his reasons on this union, this similitude of interests, feelings, views, and circumstances. He observes the English have preserved their liberties because they and their leaders or representatives have been strictly united in interests, and in contending for general liberty. Here we see a genuine balance founded in the actual state of things. The whole community, probably not more than 2/5 more numerous than we now are, were represented by 700 or 800 men. The barons stipulated with the common people, and the king with the whole. Had the legal distinction between lords and commons been broken down, and the people of that island been called upon to elect 45 senators and 120 representatives, about the proportion we propose to establish, their whole legislature evidently would have been of the natural aristocracy, and the body of the people would not have had scarcely a single sincere advocate. Their interests would have been neglected, general and equal liberty forgot, and the balance lost. Contests and conciliations, as in most other countries, would have been merely among the few, and as it might have been necessary to serve their purposes, the people at large would have been flattered or threatened, and probably not a single stipulation made in their favor. In Rome the people were miserable, though they had 3 orders, the consuls, senators, and tribunes, and approved of the laws, and all for want of a genuine representation. The people were too numerous to assemble, and do anything properly themselves. The voice of a few, the dupes of artifice, was called the voice of the people. It is difficult for the people to defend themselves against the arts and intrigues of the great, but by selecting a suitable number of men fixed to their interest to represent them, and to oppose ministers and senators. And the people's all depends on the number of the men selected, and the manner of doing it. To be convinced of this, we need only attend to the reason of the case, the conduct of the British Commons, and of the Roman tribunes. Equal liberty prevails in England, because there was a representation of the people, in fact and reality, to establish it. Equal liberty never prevailed in Rome, because there was but the shadow of a representation. There were consuls in Rome annually elected to execute the laws, several hundred senators represented the great families, the body of the people annually chose those tribunes from among themselves to defend them and secure their rights. I think the number of tribunes annually chosen never exceeded 10. This representation, perhaps, was not proportionally so numerous as the representation proposed in the new plan, but the difference will not appear to be so great when it shall be recollected that these tribunes were chosen annually, that the great patrician families were not admitted to these offices of tribunes, and that the people of Italy who elected the tribunes were a long while, if not always, a small people compared with the people of the United States. What was the consequence of this trifling representation? The people of Rome always elected for their tribunes men conspicuous for their riches, military commands, professional popularity, and etc., great commoners, between whom and the noble families there was only the shadowy difference of legal distinction. Among all the tribunes the people chose for several centuries, they had scarcely 5 real friends to their interests. These tribunes lived, felt, and saw not like the people, but like the great patrician families, like senators and great officers of state, to get into which it was evident by their conduct was their sole object. These tribunes often talked about the rights and prerogatives of the people, and that was all, for they never attempted to establish equal liberty. So far from establishing the rights of the people, they suffered the Senate, to the exclusion of the people, to engross the powers of taxation, those excellent and almost only real weapons of defence even the people of England possess. The tribunes obtained that the people should be eligible to some of the great offices of state, and marry, if they pleased, into the noble families. These were advantages in their nature, confined to a few elevated commoners, and of trifling importance to the people at large. Nearly the same observations may be made as to the ephori of Sparta. We may amuse ourselves with names, but the fact is, men will be governed by the motives and temptations that surround their situation. Political evils to be guarded against are in the human character, and not in the name of patrician or plebeian. Had the people of Italy, in the early period of the Republic, selected yearly or biennially 400 or 500 of their best informed men, emphatically from among themselves, these representatives would have formed an honest and respectable assembly, capable of combining in them the views and exertions of the people, and their respectability would have procured them honest and able leaders, and we should have seen equal liberty established. True liberty stands in need of a fostering hand. From the days of Adam she has found but one temple to dwell in securely. She has laid the foundation of one, perhaps her last, in America. Whether this is to be completed and have duration is yet a question. Equal liberty never yet found many advocates among the great. It is a disagreeable truth that power perverts men's views in a greater degree than public employments inform their understandings. They become hardened in certain maxims, and more lost to fellow feelings. Men may always be too cautious to commit alarming and glaring iniquities, but they, as well as systems, are liable to be corrupted by slow degrees. Junius well observes, we are not only to guard against what men will do, but even against what they may do. Men in high public offices are in stations where they gradually lose sight of the people, and do not often think of attending to them, except when necessary to answer private purposes. The body of the people must have this true representative security placed somewhere in the nation, and in the United States, or in any extended empire, I am fully persuaded can be placed nowhere but in the forms of a federal republic, where we can divide and place it in several state or distinct legislatures, giving the people in these the means of opposing heavy internal taxes and oppressive measures in the proper stages. A great empire contains the amities and animosities of a world within itself. We are not like the people of England, one people compactly settled on a small island, with a great city filled with frugal merchants, serving as a common centre of liberty and union. We are dispersed, and it is impracticable for any but the few to assemble in one place. The few must be watched, checked, and often resisted. Tyranny has ever shown a predilection to be in close amity with them, or the one man. Derive it from kings, and it flies to senators, to decemvirs, to dictators, to tribunes, to popular leaders, to military chiefs, and etc. Delhomme well observes that in societies laws which were to be equal to all are soon warped to the private interests of the administrators, and made to define the usurpations of a few. The English, who had tasted the sweets of equal law, were aware of this, and though they restored their king, they carefully delegated to Parliament the advocates of freedom. I have often lately heard it observed that it will do very well for a people to make a constitution, and ordain that at stated periods they will choose in a certain manner a first magistrate, a given number of senators and representatives, and let them have all power to do as they please. This doctrine however it may do for a small republic, as Connecticut, for instance, where the people may choose so many senators and representatives to assemble in the legislature, in an eminent degree, the interests, the views, feelings, and genuine sentiments of the people themselves can never be admitted in an extensive country; and when this power is lodged in the hands of a few, not to limit the few is but one step short of giving absolute power to one man. In a numerous representation the abuse of power is a common injury, and has no temptation. Among the few the abuse of power may often operate to the private emolument of those who abuse it. Yours, etc., the Federal Farmer. End of Anti-Federalist, No. 10.